The safety review is Royal Newcastle Hospital's bicentennial project, which will hopefully result in huge cost savings. Advisors from Sydney Hospital's Occupational Health and Safety section say compensation payments for work-related injuries are a massive burden on the healthcare system, especially since the introduction of legislation increasing the hospital's responsibility to both employees and patients. Project Officer Mike Preston says there are real risks.
We're well aware of the dangers of injuries to backs in all areas, particularly in nursing, of course, which we've long been aware of. But of course, needle stick injuries are now a major problem, with the potential risk of hepatitis B and the AIDS virus.
150 managers from all areas of hospital life, from engineering to catering and nursing, attended the seminar, which is the first step in tightening work safety practices. Mr. Preston says the results of the project will lead to changes in health centres throughout the district.
Perhaps we haven't been as aware or as conscious of the need to provide proper training in this area in the past. But as I said earlier, with the compensation changes, it's become more obvious that we need to be more mind-worthy of the risks to the people we're looking after and to the people who work in the hospital environment.
Police say late yesterday an informant told them he'd heard and seen machine guns being fired on a property near Medowie. The police responded immediately. The area was surveyed by RAAF helicopter and aircraft, and the Special Weapons Operations Squad was called in. An orange Holden statesman left the suspected property and pulled into this service station at Medowie, where the occupants received the biggest shock of their lives. According to the service station attendant, the statesman was closely followed by an unmarked four-wheel drive vehicle. When it stopped, half a dozen men dressed in black jumped out and dragged a man and woman from the car. Moments later, several police vehicles converged on the spot and the couple were handcuffed before being driven away down Ferradale Road. Police went to the property and arrested a second van and seized a trailer full of camping equipment. The only guns found, however, were 2.22 calibre rifles and an air rifle. The trio were questioned at Raymond Terrace, and it emerged that the couple were on a camping trip with a friend on their father's property and had spent the weekend target shooting. None of the three were licensed, however, and so, under the state government's new gun laws, each was charged with a number of small firearm offences. Police said although the operation had been unnecessary, it had been good training for all involved.
It was a huge turnout for a small town like Morisset. Many of the shops were closed to enable shopkeepers to join the sea of health workers marching down the main street. The demonstrators, many of them carrying placards, then congregated at a local oval for a rally. Speaker after speaker hammered home the consequences from both the patients' and employees' point of view of closing the hospital.
It's going to have a major impact, number one, on the care of the patients. A lot of these patients have been tried in the community before and they can't cope. It's also going to have a major impact on the business community and the township of Morisset, which will be almost devastating. And it's also going to have a major impact on the nursing staff because they've got no job future.
It became very clear today that the closure of Morisset Hospital is hotting up as an election issue. The Liberals say far from closing the hospital, if they get into power, they'll be upgrading it. Legislative Council member John Jobling, speaking for opposition health spokesman Peter Collins, says he believes the Morisset vote could give the Liberal Party the 9% needed to unseat the ALP in the seat of Lake Macquarie.
We don't propose to close Morisset, that we're going to upgrade it, improve the facilities, improve the staffing, and look at the Richmond report in a sensible way, rather than just saying everybody out, tough luck if you can't cope. And I'm sure our candidate Val Samuels will pick up the votes from here today, and she'd make an excellent caring member for this area and would work at it, which would be a lovely change.
The crash happened at about 7:30 when the driver of this HR Holden sedan apparently lost control. Ambulances and a police rescue truck converged on the scene only to find the driver dazed but untouched. 30-year-old John Griffin vividly recalled the crash and the power pole toppling onto his car.
I just come over the hill and there's a car in front of me. I hit the brakes. I just couldn't believe it. I just sideways down the hill. Next thing I realised I hit the pole and the pole come crashing down. And the wires of the lights and things like that are just flickering all over the ground.
What did you think straight after the crash?
Well, I was just hoping there's no one else involved and things like that.
Evening traffic was able to creep past the wreck but was brought to a halt for several minutes while tow trucks separated the car from the power pole. Although no one was injured, an ambulance crew was required across the road where an elderly man received minor treatment when the blackout cut power to a machine assisting his breathing. Ambulance officers used an emergency generator to overcome the crisis. A spokesman for Shortland County Council said replacement of the pole would result in only minor inconvenience to electricity customers.
All around Australia, mines are idle today as Australia's 28,000 miners stage a 48-hour strike. The issue flared here in the Hunter Valley on Friday after talks at the New South Wales Coal Association failed to cool a dispute over flexible working conditions. Two of the valley's coal producers, Warkworth and BP Coal, have tried to introduce longer working hours and new production schedules by arbitration. Mining unions say it's provocative to go to arbitration while negotiations on the award changes are still continuing. On Friday, the companies refused to withdraw their applications to the Coal Industry Tribunal, citing acute financial pressure. This was the trigger for mining unions calling the national strike.
1988 will be a year of achievements for Australians, but few will reach the heights of Newcastle Mountaineer Austin Brooks. Mr Brooks is preparing to lead an expedition which hopes to place a number of Australians on the top of Mount Everest.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Harbourside Haven Retirement Village officials met with Colin Freeman and New South Wales Nurses Association representative Madge Nielsen this morning to discuss the sacking. Outside the closed meeting, a group of disgruntled staff and patients' relatives waited to hear the outcome. Their wait was in vain. After talks lasting around 1.5 hours, the meeting broke up with the issue still unresolved. During the meeting, village board members gave their reasons for sacking Mr Freeman.
Well, there were certain aspects of his work that we found unsatisfactory, mainly in the management sphere.
Mr King says Mr Freeman had a very good relationship with the patients, but couldn't organise staff and resources properly. New South Wales Nurses Association Hunter Region organiser Madge Nielsen says she'll defend Mr Freeman.
You've heard both sides of the story this morning. Do you think there was a reason for his dismissal?
No comment.
Has he got a case to be reinstated?
I hope so, yes.
She says no further action will be taken until Mr Freeman decides what he wants to do. His options include having the association negotiate for him with the hospital board or going to the Industrial Commission to fight his dismissal. The hospital isn't eager to have him back.
We'll abide by any decision by any arbitrator, but the board wouldn't be happy to reinstate him, no.
What are your feelings following those talks?
Mr Freeman doesn't share Mr King's view.
I'm still very upset about it.
Would you like to be reinstated if that's possible?
Yes, I would.
And how possible do you think that is?
I think, I don't know. I really don't know.
All right, they should do us, I think.
a 2.5-hour meeting to discuss the charges against 2 prison officers. It's alleged a 24-year-old inmate was assaulted in his cell last Friday night by officers wielding a baton, causing lacerations to the man's scalp and bruising to his body. Yesterday's meeting was told detectives attached to the Corrective Services Department had summoned 2 more officers to appear in court to face assault charges on the same prisoner. The officers voted to go on an immediate 24-hour strike and to fill in their resignation forms, claiming their colleagues are being victimised.
We believe that there is a conspiracy by prisoners within Maitland Jail to have discipline and good order that is now maintained at Maitland Jail broke down to something that to where they can run the jail. That is, the prisoners run the jail.
The prison officers will meet again at Maitland Jail at 8 a.m. this morning. State opposition spokesman for Corrective Services Michael Yabsley has been informed of the crisis. It's believed Mr Yabsley may visit the area within the next few days. Striking officers have invited him to attend the court hearing on Friday when they plan to hand in their resignations. Cathedral was a fitting venue for last night's recital. Its grandeur was matched by English composer Arthur Wills. His Fenland Symphonic Suite for ground organ and brass band proved an exciting challenge for 30 of the region's top brass musicians, including organist Philip Mathias. Conducted by John Calloway, the contemporary work was performed for the first time in Australia, a local tribute to the bicentenary.
In the news tonight, a British judge has released former Queensland policeman Jack Herbert on bail after he made a brief appearance in a London court. Herbert, who was named in the Fitzgerald inquiry, was arrested yesterday after disappearing 8 months ago. For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
The disquiet at Maitland Jail arose over an incident last Friday night. It's alleged a 24-year-old inmate was assaulted in his cell by officers wielding a baton, causing lacerations to his head. 2 warders have been charged over the incident and are due to appear in Maitland Court tomorrow. 2 more officers have been summoned to appear in court to face charges of assaulting the same prisoner. This morning, prison officers gathered at Maitland Jail and unanimously voted to strike for the rest of the day. They will gather at Maitland Court tomorrow in uniform as a show of support for their colleagues. Afterwards, they'll meet back at Maitland Jail to decide future action. The issue that has most upset the prison officers is the suspension of 2 warders while their cases are being heard, and that's shaping up into a major fight.
There is at the present time over at Cessnock prison officers that have been suspended for 2 years, still awaiting court cases on various charges. Now, that affects a man's livelihood too greatly as far as we're concerned. You simply cannot play ducks and drakes with men's livelihoods if they've got families on the strength of what prisoners say. And it's too much of it going on. Too many prisoners are laying charges against officers, and on the strength of those charges, the Corrective Services Commission and the government are then putting those men off without any salary or without any option of earning a living.
Earlier in the day, before news of the suspensions, Mr Armstrong said if the men were suspended, he'd be calling on prison officers around the state to strike for 24 hours. Mr Armstrong claims prison officers are being put in an absurd situation if they cannot exercise control.
These people are in jail because society has put them there. Society's misfits. Now, prison officers have then got to spend the rest of their lives working and controlling them. and if you're not going to give us some method to control it, then they'll give the tires over to the prisoners, we'll give the prisoners the guns and the keys, and they can run the prison system, because if governments are not prepared to support their law enforcement officers, then you get anarchy. And unless we get some control back at Maitland Jail, and indeed all jails in the state, we're heading for anarchy. And frankly, I cannot for the life of me
Brothers Nick and Peter Gerakites have owned the Great Northern for the past 10 years. The present building is more than 50 years old, but the Great Northern was built twice before. Each time the building was demolished, but Nick Gerakites says the new owner won't knock the building down. He says the hotel is listed with the Heritage Council Trust and is under a permanent preservation order. Prospective owner, Sydney businessman Maitland, is expected to restore the hotel to original condition and continue to operate it as a hotel. Tourist accommodation may also be provided to attract visitors to the Hunter from Sydney. Mr Gerakites says staff will stay on with the new owner, along with his brother Peter as licensee manager. Over the years, he says hundreds of newlyweds have held wedding receptions at the hotel. Prominent guests have included a former Governor-General, Douglas MacArthur during the Second World War, and Bob Hope in 1943.
The offender, and he's here with the...
Members of the Bolton Point Marmong Point Progress Association gathered outside their local member's office wielding placards. They say for the past 9 months they've been fighting proposals by Pacific Colliery to use Longwall mining to extract coal north of the lake. Residents say a public inquiry to be chaired by former Industrial Commission Judge John Day will be inadequate, and they want a commitment from the government that Longwall mining won't go ahead. They stormed member for Lake Macquarie Merv Hunter's office, demanding he call Environment Minister Bob Carr to seek that assurance.
9 months we've asked to speak to that minister, and even now before election we can't get to see him. And we're really asking you today if you could phone him up today. Phoning up Mr Carr today, we want to see him. This department of his has been involved in recommending in Wyong that they don't longwall mine under residential areas. Why can't he be involved to do the same thing with us?
About that all day, mate, when the minister is bound to have an inquiry. Now, he feels that he shouldn't be taking sides prior to that inquiry. That the inquiry should
Unable
be
to
done.
locate Mr Carr's telephone number, Mr Hunter assured the residents that he had been pushing for such an inquiry since late last year, and that his support was not sitting on the pre-election bandwagon. The residents were not convinced.
I think residents see it as a political manoeuvre before the election to try and take the heat off Mr Hunter. And that won't happen. The heat is on Mr Hunter, it is on the electorate, it's on Mr Unsworth, because it's a very simple matter for them to say, we will ensure that existing residential areas are saved from longwall mining. And BHP has got 80% of their lease left.
Mr Newlock arrived in Cessnock to a warm greeting from a small band of party followers. Cutting the ribbons, he officially launched the ALP election campaign for local member Stan Neely, assisted by Cessnock's Mayor Marie Callaghan. Planning to retire from the political arena next month, the Deputy Premier is bowing out, content with his track record.
Over the years that I've been in Parliament and been a minister for almost 12 years, I've met people, been places and done things that is only the rare opportunity for just a few people.
You've certainly suffered a few scars and fought a few battles in your varied portfolio.
Yes, well, there's no doubt about that. You can't be up and doing at the very high positions of power and influence without suffering scars, but I've come through it okay, and I can look back on it with a great deal of satisfaction.
Then it was on to Cessnock Show, where the guest of honour officially opened the annual event. Champion bulls, heifers, horses and goats showed their winning style in the Grand Parade. The two-day show mainly features horse and cattle events in the centre ring, but the old favourites like wood chopping championships, daredevil stunts and Sideshow Alley proved popular attractions. The show will wind up tonight after a colourful fireworks display.
Many in the area believe the waterways should be the principal election issue for the Great Lakes. Tony Irving, Secretary of the Wine Ratepayers Association.
Well, really it's quite appalling. We've got virtually all the foreshore completely silted up. We've got mud, black ooze, slime. It's an entrance that's been closed for very many years. It's in appalling condition, really.
And so you think this is going to be the major issue in the upcoming election?
Well, I believe it is.
Today, the association organised a public meeting asking the candidates to outline their plans for the waterways. Feelings about the lakes run high. Locals made the most of the opportunity to make some pointed protest and pose needed questions to the politicians.
An upkeep of the lakes.
Liberal candidate for the seat is Bob Gray, who says his government would demand much of the lake's major tenant.
We would make Elcom pay for their 25 years of neglect, rape and desecration of the system. Elcom would
Mr.
have
Gray
to
was
reveal
supported
for
by
all to
Shadow
see.
Environment Minister Tim Moore.
Yes, a single body managed by Wyong Shire Council that would get royalties from dredging of the lake. That would be topped up by Elcom and the state government, and that would provide a framework for a complete restoration program for the lake at no cost to the ratepayers of Wyong Shire.
So the state government had come to the party no matter what that amount was?
Largely.
Sitting member for Gosford and Labor candidate for the new electorate of the entrance is Brian McGowan. He says Labor would fund the lake's clean-up dollar for dollar with the council.
We're prepared to cooperate with Wyong Shire Council on a dollar for dollar basis. Now that doesn't mean that the ratepayers have to pay, it just means that the funds that they get from government lands should be put towards the lakes.
But if those funds are going into the lakes, wouldn't that mean that the council would have to cut back on other services?
No, under Section 352 of the Local Government Act, they are required to spend it on foreshores. All they have to do is to say that they'll...
Good afternoon, I'm Ross Hampton. Striking miners from the BP and Warkworth collieries have decided to return to work. If an aggregate meeting of Northern mine workers tomorrow endorses the decision, the men will start work on Wednesday.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Just a second. I just want to say that NBN or...
Do you agree that if there's a resumption of work, to allow a resumption of work to take place so that the national
provisor that if there is any attacks.
Those against. From Warkworth and from... Is there any opposition to that? If not, I'll put all those in favour. Against? Declare